called a contingent claim, and this has this beautiful feature where both parties don't have an obligation, but one of the parties has a right. So I've explained this before in a previous video, and let me explain this again with the same example that we discussed earlier, which is Amy Investments getting into. So first we discussed a forward contract in a previous video where Amy was getting into a forward contract to sell shares of Airbus at 30 euros per share, right? Now, and what was happening in that example is, if let's say the share price went down to 25 euros, so Amy Investments would be happy because they locked in a selling price of 30 and the market is at 25, so they'll be happy. But on the other hand, if the price went up to 35, they would not be happy because they could sell in the market at 35, but they have gotten into this contract to sell at 30 and they can't get out of that contract because it is an obligation. So a forward contract or a futures contract is an obligation, which is the type of derivative called a firm commitment. Now, how that is different from a contingent claim is that here there is a right, not an obligation. So they have a right to sell at 30 if they would like to. So if the price goes down to 25, then they will definitely want to execute this right. But if the price goes up to 35, then they would say, hey, we don't want to sell at 30. We're going to sell at 35 in the open market. So this is the beauty of contingent claim, which means that the holder of the contingent claim has the right but not the obligation to make a final payment on the contingent. Now, let me further clarify this, that who has the right? The buyer of the option, which is the contingent claim, has the right. Now, that's not necessarily saying that the buyer of the option is going to be buying the asset, which we will see in the next slide, is that this option can be a put option or a call option, which means if they are buying a put option, they have the right to sell a certain asset at a certain price. And if they are buying a call option, then they have the right to buy. And we will talk about this a little more in the next slide. But before I get into that, there is something you need to understand, that this right has to be exercised within a certain time period. So there is a time limit. And with this can be either a time limit which is open until it expires. So you can exercise that right anytime before an expiration date or only on that expiration date. So if the right can be exercised only on the expiration date, this is what we call a European option. And if that right can be exercised anytime before the expiration date, this is what we call an American option. The buyer of the option is said to be the long party and the seller of the option is said to be a short party. Now you must be thinking, wow, this is an amazing instrument. I want to get this, right? Because it gives you the right to execute something when you want to, and otherwise you don't have to. So naturally this doesn't come for free. There is a payment that has to be made. So the buyer or the holder of the option, which is said to be long, buys this right, but naturally they have to pay a sum of money to the other party, which is the seller or writer of this option. So this seller or writer, they receive a premium. It's like think of it like an insurance policy, which you pay a premium and you get a right. So just like that, the long party pays this premium and the short party receives the premium, And against this, the long party gets the right to either buy or sell a certain asset, depending if they're buying a put option or a call option. Now, remember when we talked about forwards and futures, both were very similar in the sense that they both had commitments, but forwards were over the counter, customized, and futures were exchange traded derivatives. That means they were very, very standardized. Now, options can be both. They can trade on exchanges or they can be customized and done over the counter. So, they can be of both types. Now, we've already talked about this, and let's talk about this again, that there are two types of options. One is a call option that gives the holder the right to buy, whereas the put option gives the holder the right to sell any underlying asset at a given price on or before a specified date, right? So this is a right for the holder of the option, but for the seller of the option, this is an obligation. The seller of the option, or you can also call that party the writer, the seller or writer of the option, does not have a choice. They have an obligation. They have an obligation, and they have to make good on their obligation if the buyer of the call option or the put option requires them to. If the buyer or the holder of the option wants to exercise their right, then the seller have to give them what they have committed. Let's look at an example. So there are two parties here, A and B. A is the seller. So naturally for A it's an obligation. So you can call them the seller, writer, or short party. B is the buyer or the long party. And what's the contract? As you can see, it's to buy a share, so definitely it will be a call option. To sell would be a put option, and to buy is a call option. So since B is having a right to buy, therefore definitely they are getting a call option, and they are getting the right to buy a company share of strong steel for $50 per share after 6 months. Now, in our example, B has bought the right to buy, hence it is a call option. If they would have gotten a right to sell, this would have been a put option, but in this particular example, this is a call option since they are getting the right to buy. Now, if B has the right to buy a share, exercise the option of strong steel anytime between now and 6 months, then it would have been an American style option. But since they can only exercise after 6 months, then this means that this is a European option, since only at expiration the right can be exercised, and that is what is the case with a European style option. $50 is the exercise price. So obviously if they have the right to buy at $50 and after 6 months, let's say the stock price for strong steel is 70, so they can buy at 50 and sell at 70, so they will be very happy, right? So the long party of a call option makes money when the asset goes up. And let me demonstrate this to you. So let's talk about each party separately. There is A, which is the short party, and there is B, which is the long party. They sign a contract according to which B has the right to buy one share for 50 after 6 months, right? So B has bought the right to buy. A has bought the right, or A has sold the option, which means they have got the obligation to sell the share at 50, and against this they received an option premium. Now I told you obviously this doesn't come for free. When B is the long party and they are getting the right to buy this share at 50, naturally they are paying something for this, right? And that payment, which is called the premium, is in this case $3. So B is paying A $3. So let me write this over here, that B is paying A $3, which is the premium, against which A is committing to sell a share for $50 to B after 6 months, right? Now, this is the starting point for B. Why? Because they paid $3. And this is the starting point for A because they received $3. So when the situation is at 0 today, B is paying $3 and A is receiving $3. So this is where we are starting off. Now we're going to look at the payoff and profit. First, I want to talk about the payoff. So the payoff for both parties is 0. If we ignore the payment that B has made to A, and we'll come to that payment later when we calculate the profit. Right now, first let me talk about the payoff. So here is 50. Now, if the price goes above 50, so what happens if the price goes above 50? Since B has a right to buy this share at 50, and let's say after 6 months, the price is going up to 70, right? If the price goes up to 70, B will be very happy. Why? Because B can buy for 50 and sell for 70. So this profit of 0 to 20 will be there if the price of the share goes from 50 to 70, and this is what we call the payoff for B, which means as the share price goes from 50 to 70, B is going to have a payoff which will be of $20. Now, the important thing is that they are starting off from -3 because they paid -3 for this right. And as the payoff comes, it pulls their profit up, right? So this is their profit, which will be a little less than 20 because it will be 20, the payoff, minus the 3 which they paid for that right. So they are going to get a profit of 17. This is the profit for B and the payoff is 20, whereas the profit is 17. Now let's look at what will happen for A. If the share price will go up from 50 to 70, naturally A is going to lose money as the share price will go up because they're going to have to buy an expensive share in the market and give it to B for 50. And even so, this is their payoff, right? So this is the payoff for A. And if you look at their profit will start from +3 because they receive the premium. But then as the share price is going up, their payoff is negative and that is pulling their profit down. So their profit will be, the payoff will be -20 over here and their profit will be 3, which was the starting premium they received from B, minus the -20. So it will be -17. So this is how this whole situation works out, and I will give you multiple examples to explain this again. Now, again, from the perspective of the call option buyer, which is party A in this case, sorry, party B in this case, and their profit is the stock price, which we saw going up to 70, and the exercise price, which is 50. So whatever is maximum, of max of 0 or stock price minus exercise price. So naturally 70 minus 50 is 20, which is more than 0. Hence the maximum of these two is 20, and that will be the payoff for this party. However, let's say if the stock price didn't go above 50, then there, let's say it was at 40. So 40 minus 50, which is the exercise price, is minus 10, right? So what is the maximum? What is the maximum of 0 and minus 10? Definitely 0. So in that situation, the payoff would have been 0. So it is going to be either 0, because see, this is a right. This is not an obligation. Nobody can force you to sell something, to buy it for 50 and sell for 40, because this is a right, not an obligation. You will only exercise that right if the stock price is above your exercise price. If it is not, you will let the option expire, you will not exercise your right, and it will be worth 0 for you. So let's look at another example. So suppose you buy a call option with an exercise price of 30. Now this is a call option which is giving you the right to buy an asset for 30, which means you will only exercise this right if the underlying asset price is above 30. So let's look at three scenarios. One, when the asset is at a price of 25 at expiration, when it is at 30, and when it is at 35. Now when the asset is at 25, naturally you will not exercise, because 25 minus 30 is minus 5, and you will not exercise, and therefore your profit or your payoff will be 0. Your profit will be negative because you've paid a premium for this. So in this situation, your payoff is 0, because you will not exercise the right, and your profit will be actually minus 1, because you paid $1 premium for this, to buy this right, to buy this asset at 30, but you didn't utilize this right, and that $1 has gone to waste. So your profit will be negative 1, and your payoff is 0. If the asset goes to 30, so 30 minus 30 is 0. So again, you've not made any money, and your profit will still be minus 1, because that premium has gone to waste, and your payoff will be 0 still. By the way, this is a situation which we call the option is at the money. And when the option is not in the money, which is when it's not making money, where the spot price is less than your exercise price, this we call option is out of the money. And I will talk about this in a later slide. This situation where the spot price is now more than your exercise price, for a call option, this is good news, because 35 minus 30 is 5. This is what we call option is in the money. And you have a positive payoff of $5. So your payoff is $5, and your profit will be $4, because after deducting this premium of 1, you will be left with $4 profit. And this will demonstrate the profit, that the profit over here is the maximum of 0, or the spot minus the exercise price minus the premium. So as you can see in this last example, that your profit is positive because spot price is 35. So 35 minus 30 is 5, minus 1, which is the premium that you have paid, and you are left with a profit of 4. And in the first two situations where the option is out of the money or at the money, you are having a profit of minus 1, because the payoff is 0, and you're still having to lose the $1 premium that you have paid. Now let's look at the other party's perspective, which is the seller. Now seller obviously is having a completely opposite perspective, where if the spot price is more than the exercise price, they're going to have a loss, right? And if you look at the last situation over here, when the spot price goes to 35, so 35 minus 30 is 5, but then you notice this minus sign over here, that for them this is a negative payoff, and they can only go into loss, they cannot go into profit, because if they are in a position where, let's say, the price is at 25 and that is less than the exercise price of 30, so naturally they don't choose whether this will be exercised or not, because the right to exercise is with the buyer of the call option, right? So the buyer or the holder of the option will not exercise, hence this will not happen and the payoff will be zero in both scenarios. However, if they go into a loss, they will have to pay that loss, because the buyer will be going into a profit and they will exercise their right to buy at 30 and sell at 35. But if you look at this is the payoff. But why is this person selling this call option, or why is this institution selling this call option? Because if you look at their payoff, they are actually making money in both these scenarios. So if the stock price is 25, the option will not be exercised because it is out of the money and it is at the money. So even if it is exercised, there is no profit, no loss over here. And the premium that is being paid to the short party is the profit. So what happens is, practically speaking, the financial institutions that sell these options, that write these options, do something called financial engineering. So this is just a little extra knowledge for you. To price these options, and that is how they calculate what the premium should be. And naturally they are smart, so they are charging a premium which usually is going to be bringing in profit for them, because in majority of the scenarios the options will expire out of the money and they will just keep earning this premium. As you can see, in two of the scenarios it is a profit for the short party which is writing this call option. Now, what we just discussed was call option. Now for put option, it is similar. It's just that you switch your X and S, because naturally this is for giving the right to sell, right? So the person who's buying the option now has the right to sell, and if they will be having a right to, let's say, sell something for $30, they will only be happy if the market price goes below that. Because if the market price is 25 and they have the right to sell at higher than the market price, so what they can do is they can buy at the market price and sell at the higher price for which they have a right to. So the payoff for the put holder is X minus S, and for the seller of the put option is also X minus S, but this is negative, right? And obviously here you just add the premium and here you subtract the premium to calculate the profit of the buyer and the profit of the seller, where P is the premium. Now, very, very interesting discussion about the intrinsic value and the time value of options. Now, what we talked about, S minus X for call options or X minus S for put options, this is the intrinsic value of an option, which means how far away is the spot price from the exercise price. And if it is in the money, so if it is a call option, which means the spot price is greater than this exercise price, which we saw in the example of 35 being greater than 30, that would be in the money. And if it is at the money, where we saw 30 is equal to 30, where exercise price and stock price were the same, or if it is out of the money, where we saw the spot price was 25, which was less than the exercise price of 30, it would be out of the money. Now, this difference between the spot price and the exercise price is called the intrinsic value of the option. But the option usually has having another component of its value. So let's say there is a option that you go and see in the market which has an exercise price of 50, and this is a 90-day European option, and it is trading in the market for $4.6. Now you go and you check the market that the spot price of this asset is currently at 53, and you compare this 53 to 50 and you say, hey, 53, which is the spot, minus the exercise price, which is 50, so this option is only in the money for a profit or a payoff of $3. So why is the option trading in the market? Why is this right to buy at 50 trading in the market at 4.6? And then you realize that there is something else in this option, which is called the time value of this option, because this option is going to expire after 90 days. So this spot price can go higher during the next 90 days. It could even come lower, but there is a possibility that it could even go higher. So how that market is pricing in the value of this option based on the possibility that it can go further higher is by this additional price of 1.6. So $3 for the intrinsic value, which is the difference between 53 and 50, and $1.6 is for that right to buy this option, which gives you a right to buy this asset at 50, which could go up in price before the expiration happens. So this option has two components. One is the exercise value component called the intrinsic value, which is basically your S minus X, or 53 minus 50, which is 3. And the other one is the time value component, right? So the call option exercise value or intrinsic value is 3, and the time value is the difference between the value or the price at which the option is trading in the market minus its intrinsic value, and this is the price. So we reverse calculated this from the market price of the option, and this is the time value. So naturally, the longer the time left to expiration, the more probability that the stock price could go up or even down. But definitely there is a possibility that it could go up during this time. So the more time there is to the expiration, the higher time value of the option will be. And as you come close to expiration, the time value goes down as time passes and you come to the expiration, because the option is about to expire. Now it doesn't matter with whether there is a probability of going down or up, because expiry is here. Either you exercise the right or you don't exercise the right. So the time value becomes close to 0 and then eventually becomes 0 as the option expires. So at expiration, call and put options, both their values are equal to the intrinsic value, only that whatever is the difference between S minus X for a call option and S minus X for a call and X minus S for a put, which is the intrinsic part, only this is left towards the end. The time value becomes 0 as the option reaches its expiry. Now let's say you are the long party, right, and you have purchased an option. Let's say you have purchased a call option, and there is a short party that has sold you this call option. Now you have already given them a premium. Let's say this is $3 premium you have given them, and they have given you the right to buy a certain asset, an asset for, let's say, $50. Now the stock price of this asset, it goes up to $70, right? The spot price goes up to $70. Now you want to go and you want to buy this for 50, and you are unable to get hold of these guys. You're calling them, they're not receiving the phone. You go to their office, they're not in the office, and then you're worried that you've paid this premium and you can make this very nice profit, which is 70 minus 50. You can buy at 50 and you can sell in the market at 70, but these people are not to be found. And this is what is known as counterparty credit risk, which is one-sided. You are facing this. The seller has no credit risk. They have no exposure. They have received this premium. So they are the seller and they have received the premium. Now you, which is the option buyer, face the counterparty credit risk that if they run off at maturity, the seller, then what are you going to do? So you should know this, that options have a one-sided counterparty credit risk. And that is it for options for this learning module.